Taylor Swift fans were outraged when the Eras tour went on sale and they couldn't get tickets, and tickets were crazy expensive. Bruce Springsteen tickets went as high as $5,000. Similar issues happened with Blink 182, Paramore, and many, many other artists. It's all because of dynamic pricing. Who's really at fault, though, about dynamic pricing? Is it Ticketmaster and Live Nation, who is getting most of the blame and most of the heat right now? Is it the artists and their teams? What decisions do the artists and their agents and managers make in all of this? Do the fans contribute to the problem that we currently have with Ticketmaster? And also, what role do local governments play in this when they have exclusive contracts with Ticketmaster? And does AEG Presents get a free pass? They're the second biggest promoter in the world, and they're the biggest venue manager in the world. This one is for the fans. Lots of anger is being directed at Live Nation and Ticketmaster, and sure, they deserve it, but they're not the only one that is at fault. So this video, I will explain how it all works, how dynamic pricing got started to begin with, what's everyone's role, and how can we change it.
So Ticketmaster, speaking of things that are expensive, Ticketmaster is telling Taylor Swift fans today it's seeing a historically unprecedented demand for tickets to Swift's new tour Eras.
Noting the tour brought record-setting traffic to its website, adding Taylor would need to perform over 900 stadium shows for everyone to get a ticket.
Bruce Springsteen is taking heat now from his fans after his tickets for his 2023 tour recently went on sale for reportedly as much as $5,000 each.
Fans looking to buy a seat this week were stunned to see Ticketmaster prices, some seats selling in the thousands, even up to $10,000 for a single seat.
So let's get started in how dynamic pricing even got started to begin with, or platinum ticketing, right? Whichever, they're both pretty much the same thing. So for this video, I'm going to be focusing on a Taylor Swift tour, and I know one of the biggest issues that fans had with Ticketmaster on this tour is them giving out way too many codes and having really, really long waits in the queue, right? But the one of the biggest complaint really is the pricing of ticketing, right? And the extremely high fees that Ticketmaster adds onto the tickets. So yes, Ticketmaster is owned by Live Nation. However, one important note, and we'll get a little more into that in a second. These shows, the Taylor Swift tour is not being promoted by Live Nation, right? There's a different promoter involved, which we'll get into revealing who this promoter is. But Live Nation is not making the lion's share of the money. And who is promoting? More on that in a second, right? So first, some background on ticket scalpers. So I'm going to show a few quick clips on how ticket scalping has become a ginormous revenue stream for entrepreneurs, right? For people that are trying to start a side hustle. And this is nothing against scalpers at all, right? This is not a video to shame scalpers. This is just really just the background on how it all started. One of the examples in the video, you'll see someone scalping Shawn Mendes tickets, and he bought the tickets for $440 each and sold them for $1,900 each, right? So making a $1,500 profit essentially on the tickets.
You could see here I bought them total, both of them, for $880, and I resold them for $3,420.
We purchased 2 tickets for a total of $241.40. We sold these tickets on StubHub for $895 each.
So as you saw in those videos, right, there's a giant opportunity for a side hustle, scalping tickets. People make a lot of money. And again, nothing against that at all. However, if you can make your money in a legitimate, legal way, go for it, right? But the issue that the concert industry had with that is the $440 ticket was sold for $1,900, right? So $440, which is the price of the ticket, that is the amount of money that goes towards the show, right? So that's the amount of money that is going to pay for promoters, production, the artist, the venue, right? All the expenses that come along with the show. And then the extra $1,500 is basically pure profit for the scalper. So kudos to the scalper, right? Because they made 3 times as much money on that ticket than the artist, the promoter, and the venue did. The concert industry was looking for a solution because what they were basically looking for is, how do you put more of that money into the artist's pocket, right? So here's a clip from Michael Rapino, the CEO of Live Nation, speaking exactly to that. So there's no video with this clip. This is from of the Promoter 101 podcast where they interviewed Michael Rapino, and he kind of explained how basically the artist needs to get smarter at pricing the house so more of that money goes into the artist's pocket.
My goal every day is, I believe, ultimately, the way to solve secondary is to price the house better. Quit being so bashful. If they're going to pay more, charge more, and then ultimately lock it down with a verified technology type of format where you can get that $100 ticket direct to your fan. We as a company have no vested interest for secondary to win. We have a vested interest for the pot to get bigger, the artists to say, we're brilliant, we made them more money. That's ultimately how we win. You know, the artist should control the ticket is my belief. He should price the house however he wants. We're going to always push him to probably make sure he prices it realistically so we don't have $2 billion in secondary sitting on the other side, because as long as there's $8 billion in secondary, we can all work all hard all day and point fingers at who's doing what, but that's a real industry of professional bots monetizing the $8 billion from the business. That to me should be in the pot with the artist and the sports teams.
So as Michael Rapino kind of mentioned in that video, right, the artist has a say in the ticket prices, right? So what is the artist and their team's involvement in all of this and how ticketing works? At the end of the day, how much tickets are being sold for is being directed by the artist and their team, right? Their agent, their manager. It's not the promoter that sets the price. It's not the venue that sets the price, right? The artist has to agree. First of all, the artists usually, when they reach out to promoters and venues, they will tell them, right, send me an offer at these ticket prices. And if the promoter tries to push to take a price a little bit because they're trying to cover all their expenses, and maybe I can make another video on how forecasting and budgeting works. But once they create their budget and forecast, if their revenue does not cover all of the expenses and the artist guarantee the money that the artist gets paid, then they have to raise ticket prices, right? So when they're raising ticket prices, the artist has to sign off on that. The artist and their team has to approve on ticket prices. So when it comes to dynamic and platinum ticketing, the artist approves if the promoter and venue are even allowed to use dynamic pricing, right? And platinum ticketing. So it's not the promoter's say. The promoters can suggest it, the promoter can ask for it, but the artist has to sign off on that. And the reason the artist will sign off on that, because as you saw in the video of Michael Rapino, it grows the pot and it puts more money into everyone's pocket, right? It puts more money into the artist's pocket, it puts more money in the promoter's pocket, it puts more money in the venue's pocket. The other big issue is when the ticket price increases, right? The service fees increase as well, because the service fees are based on a scale on what the price of the ticket is. So the higher the ticket, the higher the service fees, right? So let's talk about the service fees. Real quickly, again, I have done another video on how promoters make money, so I'll drop a link to that in the description. But so one of the main ways that promoters make money is service fees, right? So we'll talk about more on that in just a second. And the one thing I want to mention here is the artist has the opportunity to actually waive service fees, right? The artist doesn't happen often. Promoters usually always push back on this, and the venues usually always push back on this because that's how they make their money, right? A lot of times on bigger shows, artists get 85 to 90% of the revenue, which means there's not a lot of money left over to really make money, right? And Michael Pinas talked about this extensively, right? On the margin that they make on shows at Live Nation, and most promoters, even me as an independent promoter, the margin of what they make on shows is somewhere between 1% and 5% of all the revenue, right? So they profit very little on that, which is why they have other revenue streams, which is how they really make their real money. So it's not off the ticket price. So the way dynamic pricing works on Ticketmaster is it's all based on supply and demand, right? So when there's higher demand, then they use an algorithm or an AI, whatever they use. They use basically it's all automatic, right? So when there's really high demand, the program within Ticketmaster or the AI or the code, whatever, right? Within milliseconds, it drives up the ticket price sky high. If there's a lot of people in the queue waiting to buy tickets, it's going to push that ticket price, right? So basically, how dynamic pricing works, it can flex the price of every single seat in the house automatically, right, without anybody going in there manually doing that. So back in the day, this was done as well, just manually, but now Ticketmaster can do this automatically with a bot, and it just boosts up the prices. So the higher demand there is, the higher that ticket price is, and again, the higher those fees are going to be, right? So the fans do contribute at the end of the day, because if there's really high demand for a ticket and not a lot of supply, then the price is going to go up, right? So the algorithm within the machine is going to push the ticket prices up. And if fans keep paying these insane ticket prices, that there's nothing's going to change, right? It's not going to change when you get rid of Ticketmaster. No matter what ticketing platform you use, the prices are going to keep going up. Two of the venues on the Taylor Swift tour are SeatGeek, right? They're not even Ticketmaster. And SeatGeek has the exact same technology, and AEG has a competitor to Ticketmaster called AXS. They're able to do this as well, right? With fans paying these ticket prices, right? One thing to think about, a question I asked when was this, in 2022, in the summer of 2022, I asked Live Nation and AEG reps, right? Aren't you worried about the economy going into 2023 with these high ticket prices and these guarantees that we're paying the artists, right? Because the higher the artist guarantee is, the more you have to charge for tickets, because the ticket price has to cover the guarantee and all the expenses. And the response from both reps was, the majority of people go to one or two shows a year, right? And they're going to pay no matter what for that ticket, because they want to see that one or two shows a year. And this proves them right. So at the highest level, at like Taylor Swift or Bruce Springsteen or Blink 182, Paramore, I looked at tickets for the was a Stevie Nicks and Billie Joel tour, right? They're going for $2,500. So at concerts at this very, very high level, fans are going to pay no matter what. The ones that are suffering, which and really are suffering currently, right, is the clubs, the small theaters, the smaller artists, because yeah, people are going to pay $500 for a ticket, $1,000 for a ticket, but it also means they're not going to go to as many smaller shows anymore, because they really splurge on that one or two big shows that they're going to go to out of the year. So if a stadium has a contract with Ticketmaster, right? So it's an exclusive contract for a certain amount of time. And every contract is very different, right? So kind of just speculating a little bit here, but usually on that service fee, the venue, whoever owns the contract, right? So the venue owns the contract. It's not the promoter. If the venue owns the contract, the venue gets a kickback from that service fee. It's called a rebate, right? A ticket rebate. So if, for example, so I was looking at Nissan Stadium in Nashville, right, where Taylor Swift is playing. There's no tickets for sale for her show, but there was that Stevie Nicks and Billie Joel show. There's a $400 ticket. The service fee was $75, right? So let's assume, just based on my experience, what I've seen, that the venue gets at least 50% of that $75 fee, right? At least, if not more, right? But just easy basic math, let's say they're getting 75 or 50% of that $75 fee, right? So roughly right about $40 is going to the venue. Now multiply $40 times 60,000, right? So that's where you see who is really making the money, right? On those service fees, or how the promoters or venues pay for shows. And again, if there's a $40 kickback to the venue or a rebate to the venue, it doesn't necessarily mean that the promoter gets a share of that, right? It's all now depends on what kind of agreement does the promoter have with the venue, and the promoter will fight for ancillary revenue, right? And that's one of the revenue streams that the promoter will try to get. So again, we'll get into the promoter for this tour in a second. Now, what is the government's role in all of this, right? So who owns these stadiums? So if you look at who owns the stadiums that Taylor Swift's performing in, 15 out of 20 of the stadiums are government owned, and 3 of them are government owned and operated. 5 of them are operated by, so there's 2 parts, right? So there's owners and operators. You have the people that own the stadiums, and then the people that operate the stadiums, right? They do all the staffing, they do the management for the stadium, basically the team that works for the stadium, the executive director, the programming directors, and marketing team, right? Whoever works for the venue and does all the staffing, that's who operates the venue, right? So it's not always the same people that own and operate. So again, summary, 15 out of 20 of the venues are government owned, some kind of government entity, right? Whether it's a city, a county, or some kind of sports entity they created, that is a not government agency that owns the venue, right? And then 3 of them are owned and operated by those government entities. Five of the stadiums are operated by AEG Presents. So AEG is the second biggest concert promoter in the world. 9 of the 20 stadiums are operated by the sports teams that are in those stadiums, right? So the Dallas Cowboys stadiums, the Dallas Cowboys run and operate that stadium, and then 3 of them are privately owned, right? And with all these stadiums, 19 out of these 20 stadiums, I believe the only one that hasn't used tax dollars to pay for that stadium is SoFi Stadium in San Francisco, right? That was privately funded. Now, so I'm just saying most of these stadiums are owned by government entities and tax dollars were used to pay for these stadiums. It's basically the government creating a monopoly on ticketing, right? Because the governments are getting into contracts with Ticketmaster that are exclusive. So the governments are creating the monopolies, right? Not necessarily Live Nation. Yes, Live Nation's ticketing company, Ticketmaster, is being used, but the government is getting into these agreements. And if these, my take just on this is if this, the government is using tax dollars to fund these stadiums, getting into these agreements, I don't know, shouldn't there be a better system for the taxpayer? Shouldn't there be more options on ticketing? Should they get into exclusive contracts? It's kind of like your energy bill, right? When you think about your energy bill, you only have one option in most cities in the United States. You only have one option on who you purchase your energy through. And if that company decides to skyrocket ticket prices or ticket prices, like skyrocket your electricity bill, there's absolutely nothing you can do about that, right? So if these service fees and their Ticketmaster algorithm decides to skyrocket ticket prices, there's absolutely nothing you can do about that because there is a monopoly that was created by the people that own and operate the stadiums, right? So the government, the competitors to Live Nation, right? And Live Nation doesn't really own any of the stadiums. They don't really own a lot of venues. So we'll get into who owns the venues in just a quick second. But when these monopolies are created by government contracts, that's called corporatism, right? Or crony capitalism. So this is not free market capitalism. When there's free markets, then there is more choice, more opportunity, more competition, and usually that drives price down versus driving price up. So who is the promoter? Who is AEG Presents? They're the second biggest concert promoter in the world and the number one venue operator in the world. They own a company called ASM Global, who manages or operates some of the venues that Taylor Swift is performing in, right? And ASM Global is the world's leading venue management company who works with over 350 venues worldwide. And these are stadiums, arenas, right? Big theaters. So again, why is this important? Why is this important? Why is AEG's involvement important? This tour is being promoted by Messina Touring Group, which is another conglomerate of AEG Presents. Again, the second biggest promoter in the world, right, to Live Nation, and and the biggest venue operator in the world. And AEG also owns their own ticketing platform called Access, AXS, right? So kind of seems like a conflict of interest there, right? With this whole scenario. If Ticketmaster gets a bad rep, if Ticketmaster gets broken up and whatever happens, and AEG operates all of these venues, could there be a possibility that maybe AEG is just looking for an excuse to get access into all of the venues that they operate globally and get Ticketmaster out and create a new monopoly, right? It's just something to think about. Not don't know if this is exactly happening, but just kind of speculating here a little bit. Just kind of very interesting, right? On what all is happening. And then one more note about the Messina Group. I don't have the Taylor Swift deals. I don't know how they work, right? But I used to work for the company. I know how well, not for Messina Group, but one of their conglomerates. And I've heard through the grapevine several times the way Messina Group does their deals, the way they are unique. They share any revenue that they get from ticketing, from service fees, from parking, from sponsorships, from concessions, right? Any revenue that they get, they share with the artist. So let's just speculate right here, right? Let's just say the venues get 40. So on that $75 service fee that I talked about earlier on the Stevie Nicks and Billy Joel tour. So let's say I had a $75 ticket, $40 goes to the venue, right? And then the venue is giving about half of that to the promoter, right? So they're sharing half of that. That means $20 is going to the promoter. So again, in this case with Taylor Swift, if $20 is going to the Messina Group off of every ticket service fee that's being charged, and they're sharing anywhere from 50 to 90% of that with Taylor, that means she's getting about $10 to $20 per ticket on service fees. So multiply that times 60,000 times 52 shows, that's 31 to $62 million in fees that Taylor Swift allegedly might be making on fees, right? So she's not completely innocent. She's making millions of dollars on these fees as well. And again, she's probably making 90% of all of the ticket sales too. So if, just as Michael Rapino talked in that video, right? If they're trying to price the house better, so it drives up the pot that the artist shares, that means the artist is making a whole lot more money as well, right? So she's not completely innocent in the whole what's happening here with the ticket prices and service fees and everything, right? So what's the solution to all of this, right? Again, the issue with Ticketmaster, it's not going to go away. Whether it's SeatGeek, whether it's Access, or any other competing ticketing platform, dynamic pricing is going to continue to exist, right? Unless there is some kind of more free market solution to it, or fans just stop paying, right? For overpaying for tickets. And what is important, reason I'm making this video is I want to just educate fans and people in the music industry that want to go into this industry on how it all really works, right? Because if you're going to try to throw Ticketmaster and Live Nation under the bus, I'm not defending them either, right? But you just need to be fair and throw all the parties involved under the bus. And Taylor should get some of the heat. The local governments that are creating these exclusive contracts with Live Nation or for Ticketmaster should be getting some of the heat. And the promoters, right? The promoters are the ones that are probably making the lion's share of the money, right? The promoters, so Messina Group, Taylor Swift, and the venues, they're making way more money off of these shows than Ticketmaster is, right? So it's not greedy Ticketmaster, it's everyone's greed collectively, which is the problem with the music industry, right? There's just a lot of greed when it comes to the entire industry. The pushback needs to be on the promoters, it needs to be on the artists, right? Push back on your favorite artists. There's artists out there like Foo Fighters and Morrissey that will, Morrissey is famous for not allowing service fees on any of their shows, right? Or of his shows. So if there's a show and there's no service fee on the show, he will not allow it. He will not play the show. The Foo Fighters have done campaigns called Beat the Bots, right? Where you actually have to go to the venue and buy the tickets at the venue at the regular price, right? So it's a $150 ticket. You go to the venue, pay $150 and maybe a $2 service fee on top when you're buying it at the box office. So another note, right? So it is false advertising if you advertise a $250 ticket and there's nowhere you can buy a $250 ticket, right? So usually at the box office physically is usually the only spot where you can buy the tickets. So to wrap it all up, push back on your local governments, push back on your artists, and push back on monopolies that are created by the government, right? Again, it's not a fair and free market when they're creating these monopolies. The streaming world is an example that free markets work, right? Netflix was the leader in streaming when they first started, but they didn't continue to exist as a monopoly. Now you have so many options when it comes to streaming video. And if we got government out of this whole mess, right? So if we didn't get the Senate involved and Congress involved and push back on the right entities and had a more of a free market solution, then that would eventually bring ticket prices down. There's solutions to the scalpers too with blockchain technology. There's ticketing companies now that have these blockchain codes that are changing every 5 seconds, right? Or every second these codes are changing. So you can literally only have the same person that bought the ticket use the ticket, and you cannot resell the ticket. So technology exists where you do not have to use dynamic pricing and platinum pricing. But anyways, hope you all enjoyed it. Hope you learned a lot from it. Share with whoever needs to learn, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Until next time, spread love, positivity, and kindness in the world.
Live the life you love.